that you have 6 children that are all in the school at the same time. A large portion of those were their friends. So what I started doing was I started going to the funerals, started visiting the families, helping the families out, and spending more time with my children, trying to help them overcome the loss of their friends. And as a result, I developed a large network with the families that I was starting to work with. And I started to find some comfort in there. And then one day I ran across a family that I didn't even know the family, but it's my natural thing to get up and help clean up at a repast or help set up or whatever it was to do. And I just went in, and this family didn't even know me, and I took charge of everything that they had, that they needed to have done. And it took about 6 months later, and one of the daughters came to me, and she said, "We've been looking for you." She said, "What you did for my family that day, it helped us out tremendously. To see this woman there working that we didn't even know, she was ordering things, she was setting up things, she was cleaning up, breaking down." And she said, "God bless you for what you do, because you don't know how much that meant to my family." And at that point, I think I was about 43 years old, it struck me that that was my purpose. So all the funerals, whenever my children lost their friends, I was there for the family. I would go visit, I would go sit, do whatever we could. And my daughter had a t-shirt business. I was taking photos because looking back on my husband's pictures that he had taken, we had taken thousands of pictures, but he was never in them. And I thought, how awful it is for a family to lose a loved one and not have pictures. So we started taking pictures around the areas, and just different ones kept asking. And as we were going through the pictures, we noticed that a lot of those children that were my friends, my children's friends, we had pictures of them that their families hadn't even seen. And my daughter started designing t-shirts. And she has a huge t-shirt business now. We started designing videos. But to take it a step further, it still wasn't enough. There was still more that needed to be done. Because whenever a name came up, or whenever there was someone else that had passed, I just felt obligated to go out and reach out to that person and help them out. And there are a lot of people that are part of the network that we call all the time, that are continuously calling on me, that we go back and visit. Or if they need me late at night, they call me. Or if someone else in their family passes, I'm there. Sometimes we travel. But it's just been a passion of mine just to be there to help people overcome the change in their life. Because change is difficult. We have a hard time accepting the change. And losing a loved one, each time that happens, we become broken more and more and more and more. And so I remember that one year there were so many young people that were passing. I think in 1 month we did 16 funerals. So we started holding sessions where we have time to build up, because Ecclesiastes says that there's a time for everything under the sun. So we would hold events where we would invite people to come out and talk about their stories, to bring their obituaries. And that was us. We were the one-stop shop. We did obituaries. We did the pictures. We did the t-shirts. We did whatever slide presentations that they requested. And so when me and Rudy Clay was around, we developed a relationship where if a family had lost someone and they wanted to talk to someone, he would call me and I would go by and visit with the families and talk with them. And I continued on because I'm a part of Geared for Life Homicide Watches. Sometimes I can write the stories. Sometimes they're too painful and I can't just sit. I just have to look at the blank canvas. But we try to be there as much as we can to encourage the families, to uplift them, to give them help and comfort wherever they're needed. And recently, I lost a friend. And I haven't been back to visit his family because I'm grieving right now. I had a problem dealing with that because our last words to one another was, I'll see you when I see you and call me if you need me. And I took my granddaughter to Arkansas because she wanted to see her grandmother one last time for her funeral. And while we were there, he passed away. And I remember I walked the halls of the hallway because they left him on life support for about 5 days. And I didn't want to give up. And I couldn't give in to say that he was gone. But I am, right now, myself dealing with grief. And I'm also reaching out to a mother whose son committed suicide, because in the process the other day, it was just last week, and I was in the hospital and found out that he committed suicide. So I had to reach out to families. But you always have to give yourself. And because it's so passionate, and because it's my purpose, sometimes I internalize a lot of things, but you can't do that. You have to find out how to let go, find out where your comfort point is, and how do you grow and move forward. Because if you don't, grief and stress will take you out. And you will miss out on your intended purpose and what God wants you to do here in life. So I'm looking forward to today, because as I said, continuing to deal with the grieving families, it's a difficult thing to see people hurt. And I just want to give them a message of comfort, a message of hope, and that there is life after death, and that you can go on, and that you can continue, and that you can grow. Thank you.
That they seem to be the most rewarding, and those people, it meant the most to them. I love doing, children and happy living people, but that was something that I thought, I'd really like to do that. And yet, the worst part about doing art is charging people for it. Of course, you gotta make a living. So a friend of mine told me, she's a nurse at Riley, and she said, we have an organization down here that does such and such, and they get grant money to do these kinds of things for children who are dying of cancer. And they were photographers. And I said, that sounds really like something I'd like to do, get grants and not have to charge people for my work. That would be really ideal. And to do people who passed away. So, that was something I was rolling around in my head and trying to think of how I could do it. At the same time, my sister, who there are 5 girls in my family. I'm the youngest, and my middle sister and I were very, very close. We raised our children together. We were on the phone all the time together, and she was diagnosed with a brain tumor, cancer. And we prayed, and she had surgery, and they said, we got it all. But the type of surgery that she had, the type of cancer that she had, my friend works with cancer patients at Riley, and she said, it always comes back. It always comes back. So, sure enough, they told her with no treatment, she would live 9 to 12 months. With treatment, surgery, and following up with chemo and radiation, she could live 18 to 24 months. But it was definitely a terminal situation. Well, after only 5 months, my sister passed away. She died on March 17th in 2012, and it was horrible. I just was devastated. This was my soulmate, pretty much, except for my husband. We knew everything about each other. We talked every day. My children and hers will testify way too much on the phone, but we raised our kids together. And so she went home to be with the Lord, and I did know that she knew the Lord, and I was at peace knowing that she was in a better place. She wasn't suffering anymore, but it was very difficult to lose the person that I was the closest to, other than my husband. And then my mom had been a 20-year pancreatic cancer survivor. That just doesn't happen. I don't know if you know that, but it doesn't happen. And she beat all the odds and stayed going strong, and she would get sick, and then she'd go in the hospital, and then she'd go back to assisted living. She was on a feeding tube 20 hours a day, and we took turns, all of us sisters, visiting her 1 day a week and spending time with her. Well, 7 weeks after my sister died, my mom decided she had it. She didn't want to get better, and she wanted to go home. So she did. And we had her funeral on May 12th. It was a Saturday before Mother's Day. And, that's the way things are supposed to go. You're supposed to bury your parents, not the other way around. So I knew that it was coming someday. My dad had passed away real suddenly in 2001. We felt like every day we had my mom was a miracle and a day to be thankful for. So my mom did pass away, and then I remember telling everybody at her funeral, okay, 1 week from today, we're done with sad funerals, we're going to have a celebration. May 19th was my oldest son's wedding day. We were so excited. We had people coming from all over the country, and we had a wonderful rehearsal dinner. Invited all the out-of-town guests to come so they could all visit, and we had a great time. That night we went home and sat out on the deck and talked about how excited we were to have this new girl in our family. And the next morning when I woke up, it was to the cries of my daughters who had found my husband on the floor in the living room, and he died in the night. And that was on my son's wedding day. I had to call my son, and my other two boys had stayed at his house, and tell them that their dad was gone, and we were going to go ahead and have a wedding anyway. And we did. We had a wedding, and it was probably the most surreal day of my life. I remember dancing and celebrating one minute, and the next minute I'd remember that my other half was gone. Now I do remember when I found him, the very first thought that came into my head was, oh, you're with Jesus. How awesome is that? But today, really? Today? and you have to know my husband to know that he would never draw attention to himself, especially on that day. One friend said that he traded one wedding feast for another, so he surely did. I knew he was gone to heaven, but I'd been with this man since I was 15 years old, and I was 51, almost 52. He was 54. We had 5 children and 1 grandchild that we had helped to raise. She called him Daddy because her mom said she'd share him with her. And I had to suddenly go on with life without this person. I'd never made an adult decision in my life without him. But I did, and I learned a few things about grief. First of all, my grief is sudden, unexpected, or tragic, is what we call what we do for face-to-face. I learned a few things about it. I went to therapy. Thankfully, my family had been going to this guy for another reason of trauma, and my husband had said, right after my sister died and my mom died, he said, you know, you really need to go see Roy because he can help you. He did EMDR therapy. So, yeah, after the wedding, I went to therapy, all right, and I don't think I'd have made it through that week of the funeral if I hadn't, but I went. And I also attended 3 other different grief groups. There's a great one in Highland called Wounded Healers, and it's an ongoing thing. It has like 6 sessions and then another 6 sessions, and they really do a great job of, for me, making me realize that I wasn't crazy. I couldn't read a book. I couldn't focus. I'd walk into a room and couldn't remember why I was there. I couldn't remember appointments. I forgot important things. You know, a lot of things like that happened, but I learned that that was normal, and I learned how to cope with it. I learned to set alarms on my phone so that I wouldn't forget that I had to be at the doctor or I had a meeting for my business. So grief is an ongoing thing, and you have to do the grief work to get through it. You can't, like she said, run from your problems and run from everything that's going on in your life. You have to just get through it. And in 2015, my daughter with the child had moved back to southern Indiana and reunited with the little girl's father, and he died of a drug overdose right in front of him.
Wow.
Right while he was watching my granddaughter. And then my sister's husband died of a heart attack. And all I could say to them was, you know, I wish I could fast forward for you for about 2 years, because it's pretty awful. And it doesn't get better for a little while. You know, it gets worse. So, like I said, I couldn't read a book. Well, I wanted to form a nonprofit to do face-to-face. I couldn't even read through the 30-page form. So I had my sister and a board of directors that all came together and helped me. In October of 2012, we formed Face to Face Fine Art. Our mission is that we do free portraits, hand-painted portraits for people who have lost someone to a sudden, unexpected, or tragic death. And our hope is that it will help them through the grieving process. I think you're supposed to turn on that slideshow. Yeah, okay. Nope. Never used that
Left.
button.
No, left click it and then do play.
Okay, so these are some of the portraits that we've done. And we've been doing it since 2013. We did our first portrait, and let me find what I've got here. We've done over 130 of them so far. And they're to families all across the U.S. We've done them, we ship some of them, we do that kind of thing, and then we also are in partnership with the Indiana FOP. If a first responder in the state of Indiana dies in the line of duty, we provide the family with a free portrait for the funeral. If you remember Jeff Westerfield, the portrait that was at his funeral was from us. Nick Schultz and Brittany Mukes. Now hers wasn't at the funeral because she died before we started this, but we've done probably 15 police officers and firefighters, first responders. So that's one other thing we do. It is a very spiritual thing for me to do these portraits. I sit down, first of all, I talk to the families for a long time before we get around to the pictures. Then I go through all their pictures and we find the best one that we can do to get the best image possible. And, you know, of course, I'm not a trained counselor, but I guess you can just share your experiences, and that seems to go a long way with a lot of people. We've lost loved ones to just about every imaginable means: homicides, heart attacks, accidents, aneurysms, undiagnosed diabetes, suicides, and lately, many, many drug overdoses. In September of 2015, like I said, my son-in-law, or the equivalent of, passed away from a drug overdose. I did, learn a few things. I dove into, let me go through what I learned. I consider the first 5 years after my husband's death my crash course in grief. And a sudden loss is one that occurs without any warning. Traumatic death is one that is sudden, unanticipated, violent, mutilating, or destructive, random, and or any other number of things. I learned not to find solace in drugs and alcohol. I didn't go there. I'm not a drinker. I never have been, but I knew how easily I could seek solace in medication, and I knew that I also did a lot of reading, and I found that suicide rates are higher for people who lose someone suddenly because they're not prepared for it in any way. The rate of depression is much higher. People tend to get stuck and not move forward when they have a complicated death like that, and they call it complicated grieving, and that's what I had to work through. And I'm very, very thankful that I got involved in the grief groups that I did and the counseling that I did, because it really helped. And I know my sister and my daughter both did the same. They got involved in counseling, and it really helped them. First thing I did was to dive into my faith. I've been a Christian since I was a senior in high school, and I converted to Catholicism back in the 90s, and I'm still a Catholic, but you can never be too close to God. You can never find too much of Him, and He was really my comfort. He promises He'll be a husband to the husbandless and a father to the fatherless. And I took Him up on that. I said, okay, I need you, because my provider's gone. I have no one to provide for me. I mean, I did these shows, and I made money doing portraits, but certainly not enough to support 5 children who are all college-bound or in college or in law school. I couldn't take it on. So the Lord provided. I do get paid for portraits through Face-to-Face. I do a lot of them without pay, because it just depends on what kind of donations we have in the kitty. But the reason that we named it Face-to-Face Fine Art, Commemorative Expressions, we go by Face-to-Face Fine Art, that's awfully long to say the whole thing, is because the verse in 1 Corinthians 13 verse 12 says, "For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known." I work from photos, like I said. It does have to be, by our bylaws, it has to be a sudden, unexpected, or tragic death. I've done some for friends and family who haven't been sudden. And we have made it to where any child that dies is a trauma to that family, no matter what. So we try to do children, whether they've died of cancer or some long-term disease or not. It's difficult. A lot of times we try to do parents who have died for children so that they can remember what their parent looks like. We've had, like Brittany Mukes, the corrections officer that was hit by a car in Crown Point while she was running, had a little bitty daughter. And when we presented it to her, she was about 3, when we presented it to the family, and they said, "Who's this?" "That's my mommy." And they hung it over her bed so she knows and remembers what her mother looks like. In November of last year, this is how crazy things can be with God. In the last year, I've made 3 trips to the Holy Land. I never thought I'd make it there at all. But I had a board member who had some connections there and wanted us to do portraits of people who had been killed in the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So we wrote to Grief Group, that's for both of them. And we did some for Israelis, had more response from the Palestinians because we did sort of a seminar in the West Bank for a village called Nabi Saleh. And that was probably the most emotional, heart-wrenching thing I've ever done, was to sit on that panel and have the families come up and receive the portraits that a great company here in the area had put on big canvases so that we didn't have to frame them, and we put them on like a stick through the top. And the family would come up and receive it, and then they would tell the story of how their loved one died. And most of them were children or very young people. One that really sticks in my head, and I have a book of the whole experience, is a little boy who was 6 years old at the time, but 2 years before, his home had been firebombed, and his mother and father and baby brother were all burned up. And he remembered the screams and the horror of it all. He was hospitalized for 1 year, and now he's out and living with family, and we gave him that portrait. I have a picture in the book. You can see it if you want. Him peeking over the top at his family. And then he took it and waved it like it was a flag. So it was him, and then there was another family that the son was abducted on his way to religious services. He was beaten, he was forced to drink gasoline, and he was set on fire. I mean, these are the kind of horrific deaths and that was not uncommon. I mean, that was a big thing. They were shot while they were, on their way in the car. They were open fired upon. They were shot because they had scissors in their purse. One 10-year-old boy went to prison for 3 years for having nail clippers in his backpack. So grief is affecting everybody all around the world. And one thing that really struck me that Pastor Mo said was that it's no respecter of persons. It really isn't. It doesn't matter. We all experience it if we live long enough. People that we know die. And yet, if we have a faith to hold on to, we know that that's the end result anyways, to get to eternity. I don't know how people are comforted who don't have a faith, but for me, that was what got me through it all. About 16 months after my husband passed away, the Lord brought a man into my life. And he has been with me since. He went with me to Israel And we were asked to do more pilgrimages over there. So we're going to be starting doing Holy Land tours and taking people to relive where their faith was born. And it's amazing. Your life will never be the same if you go. If you get the chance to go do it. People say, oh, aren't you afraid to go over there? Isn't it unsafe? Really? I live in Gary, right across the street from Gary, and no, it's not dangerous there. I don't have any fear on the streets. They really don't. They don't have a drug problem, and they don't have street crime like we have. Now, they have back and forth between the Palestinians and the Israelis, but they respect Americans. That's the tourist industry is their biggest dollar over there, so they're not going to involve tourists. And, you know, I've dealt with, I've got some photos over here if you want to see them of other portraits that we've done. This is pretty early on, some of these. We dealt with Marianne Evans, whose two daughters from Griffith in 2009 were brutally murdered. And she and her husband found them, and then 4 months later, her husband died of cancer. Her whole family was wiped out. So, you know, and you know what she says to me? She says, when people say, why me? She says, I say, why not me? Who am I? Everybody has things that they have to go through. And then she talked about, do you know your purpose? Boy, when my husband died, the following year, my youngest graduated from high school and went off to college. My daughter graduated nursing school and moved 4 hours away with my granddaughter. I was no longer a wife, and I was no longer a mother, and I wasn't even a grandmother right then. I had to find what my purpose was, and I really believe the Lord led me to face to face. I feel very fulfilled. I feel like I'm doing what I was born to do.
Panic is when anxiety is so powerful it overcomes physically, makes a person fainty, flight of thoughts, just fogginess, just outside of themselves, doing things, thinking wrong. The breathing is irregular, and in fact, once breathing is irregular, the whole physiological system is out of order. We find that panic and trauma situations can so disturbing that many people visit the emergency room and doctors wanting to know, why do I feel like this? I wake up like this. I can go to sleep like this. It hits me at any time. And it simply needs counseling treatment, trauma treatment, helping people discover. Oftentimes, one doesn't know why they're having a panic or anxiety attack. And trauma treatment, often we find that there is an early life traumatic experience being relived now that something else, perhaps even milder, is happening in one's life. Often they're based on even early childhood. So what we see is tools. I have tools to help a person come to a relaxed state. Some of this is by natural sensations or relaxation or so, but even instruments that ways to compel a person to relax in the relaxed state so that they can think and redefine the experience in a healthy way. Because oftentimes in trauma, the mind misinterprets situations and brings up all kinds of irrational information of ways of looking at a situation. So renewing of the mind is a part of this traumatic therapy treatment and resolution. When a person can redefine a situation, and that's, we often hear mind over matter, but and the Word of God tells us renewing of our mind, and it's so true. I practice what's known as cognitive behavior
have to run around the school on one foot. So if I hand this out to you and I catch you looking at this handout, you'll have to run around IU on one foot in the rain with no umbrella. What? All right. I'm going to have her hand those out. So make sure, don't look at them now. Listen at this. I pastored the church for 45 years, and I always have good eyesight. I said to them, when I put these glasses on, oh, I got you now. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. All right. God bless you. This way is coming. Let's offer a brief word of prayer. Father God, we thank you for this sharing moment. God, our hearts and our minds and our spirit join us in the heart, mind, and purpose. For we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank God. All right.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm just going to give you a brief history of how we got started. The J. Wade Ministries, Inc., Grief Ministry, and the word G-R-I-E-F, the acronym for that is God's Relief in Every Family. That's what the acronym of grief is, God's relief in every family. You can make it. It was taken from the scripture, 2 Corinthians 12:8 and 9. It says, 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. And each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I'm glad to boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ can work through me. The origin of this grief began September the 25th, 2015, when we received a call that our son, Reverend James Commodore Wade III, went home to be with the Lord. After many days and nights of praying and struggling and trying to process what has really happened, we really realized and finally realized that he didn't belong to us. He was God's child. God gave us relief as to my pastor, my husband, and I, and also to our family, to how to just cope with this. The purpose of the J.E. Wade Ministry, Inc. is to assist and support individuals and families suffering grief due to not only death, but loss of health, homes, employment, possessions, parents, divorces, our children, friends, education, self-pride, our focus, our relatives, our relationship, self-respect, innocence, goals, guardians, freedom, finance, and grief also come when we lose our relationship with God and the fellowship with other believers. After much prayer and study and research and processing and days of depression and just so many things that happen, we recognize that there are signs and symptoms of grief. We have to identify the stages of grief and offer aid to authenticate a successful recovery. We also provide counsel to those who are battling with regret, depression, anxiety, fear, doubt, lack of faith. And we have a mission, and our mission is to give guidance through biblical principles, practices, procedures, prayers, and the Word of God for a healthy lifestyle. This is the purpose of the J.E. Wade Ministries, Inc. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I'm a Baptist pastor, preacher, and in our tradition, we kind of talk back to each other. We kind of have, kind of a little dialogue. We don't just sit up here and just carry on. So since that happens, then I'm going to have to put you in the Zion Baptist Church in East Chicago so that we can have a kind of relationship. You know, is that all right? Okay?
Yes.
All right, come on. All right, bless your heart. Now we ready? All right, let's get ready to go to the lesson. All right, I want you to know by way of introduction, and I want to thank those who are sharing with this leadership of this Indiana Parenting Institute at Indiana University here at Northwest. I'm grateful to be here, and thank you for inviting us to be a part of this great outreach and in-reach. I like to call it in-reach and outreach. All right, by way of introduction, grief comes in many forms. And my wife touched on something. Let me just kind of give you a review. That domestic difficulties, separation, divorce, even community conflicts, political divisions, health problems, bereavement, sorrow, distress comes by what we call loss of friends and loved ones, disappointments, hardships, economic trials, you lose your job, financial problems, racial injustice, cultural warfare, domestic violence, police brutality, cyberbullying, cyberbullying. I want to make sure you get that. I don't want you to miss that because we're finding out a lot of our young people are being bullied by the internet. And let me tell you this, there's an insert that the internet has almost caused us to lose a generation. We have lost our communication skills. We don't know how to talk. We don't know how to speak. We don't know how to say good morning. We have now in our generation, just watch, just go through our culture. The cell phones have consumed us to such a degree that we bump into people on the cell phone. We knock folk down on a cell phone. And everyone has a cell phone. Now, you're not impressing anybody. We're trying to be impressive. You know you don't have all that much to talk about. Okay, so much. That was anxiety. All right. Then we have our hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, massacres, war. I want you to know all of these are the effects of grief, anxiety, fear, worry, depression, regret. And then I found out something else about grief, and that is that many times when you're going through grief, what really causes you more grief, there are people who try to convict you of some secret fault or some great transgression. In other words, what you're going through has to be something that God is disciplining you with. Then another thing is I learned about even when women have miscarriages, that's grief. Let me tell you two things. Grief is real. You ready? Mm-hmm. And grief is normal. Say it after me. Grief is real. And grief is normal. Now listen, you all can say that better than that. Come on now. Come on. I told y'all we got to go to Zion Church. Grief is normal. And grief is what? Real. It's real. And sometimes when we're going through our grieving experience, you have to be careful the words that you use to help people when they're going through that grieving experience. In some of our traditions, when people are going through that grieving experience, first thing we say is, it's going to be okay. Pray, read your Bible. Then we go to funerals. We hear a lot of stuff about, your parents in a better place. I know what you're going through. Well, let me say this. As a personal experience, you don't know what I'm going through. Right. You have no clue what I'm going through. You have an idea based upon your sympathy, based upon your empathy, but not based upon your compassion. And there is a difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. There is a difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Sympathy means that I believe I feel what you feel. Empathy means that I have an idea that I can partner with you to understand what you're going through. But compassion says, I'm literally in your shoes. I'm in your eyesight. I can actually see. And the most time, people cannot actually see because we don't deal with compassion. Jesus dealt with compassion. Oh, I felt that myself. All right. Now, let's see. What are the side effects of grief? When your heart breaks over a great loss, intense grief will touch every aspect of your life. The effects of this intense grief will vary in degrees, ranging from mild to severe, depending on where you are in the grieving process. I've learned something as I've dealt with this grief process. There is a difference between the loss of a parent, the loss of a sibling, or the loss of a wife than the loss of a child. Are you all ready? There's a difference between the loss of a parent, the loss of a wife, or the loss of a sibling than the loss of a child. Now let me tell you the difference. When you lose a parent, you lose your past. When you lose a parent or spouse, you lose your present. But when you lose a child, you lose your future. That's why it's so devastating, is because you've lost your future. Y'all hearing me? Mm-hmm. All right. So here's what I want you to look at. When you're going through your grieving experience, now there's a word, since I'm in a college atmosphere, concomitant. There's a word called concomitant. Since I'm in the university, you ought to use university word. And that means really side effects of grief. All right, let's look at it. Number one, the physical effect. You all ready? Are you all ready? Mm-hmm. No, y'all don't say that right. Are you ready? Yes. Say it like you read. Are you ready? Yes. Say yes. Yes. Put a little ump on it. Yes. Because I may get a little loud before it's all over now. So since I get loud, I want y'all to be loud. All right? All right. The physical effect or the anatomy, which deals exhaustion. That's the first one. You get exhausted. When you start going through grief, this stuff wears you out. Grief can literally wear you out. Not only that, you walk around with headaches, head hurt, inability to sleep, stay up all night, sleep 2-3 hours, wake up. You cannot digest your food. You eat, but it does not digest. Even sometimes you literally lose your appetite. You just don't want anything to eat. Then you have what we call stress. Stress. You have stress. Not only do you have stress, you also have emotional and mental effects of grief. That means you have depression. Anyone have an idea what is depression? Mm-hmm. Come on, anyone? About what is depression? We hear that all the time. I'm depressed. What is it? Tell me. Bring it out. Bring it out. Depression.
Unengaged.
What is that?
Unengaged.
Unengaged? All right, that's a good word. Anyone else have depression?
I think you're hopeless when you're depressed. It just doesn't feel like you can find an answer or an out.
Oh, when you can't find an answer and out, that could be depression. Yes. Worry, tension, anxiety, all that. But let me tell you what, can I really just tell you what depression really is? Those are kind of good reasons for depression. But let me tell you what depression really is, anxiety really is. It has to do with a compressed state. It means that I'm literally pressed down and in a cramped place. I'm squeezed. Can I say it like that? And when you are squeezed, you're uncomfortable. When we fly on an airplane now, my wife and I, we fly quite a bit, and we should enjoy flying, but I don't like flying as much as I used to, because sometimes if I don't get my first class upgrade, I'm kind of squeezed. And don't let me have to sit in the middle seat. I'm really squeezed. And sometimes depression will put you in a middle seat in your life. And you'll find yourself squeezed. It's uncomfortable. All right. Then we have dreams about our deceased. Go to bed, dream about it. We dream about the people that passed away. Then you have some forgetfulness. Now, forgetfulness is not always a part of grief. Because when you get my age, and I won't talk about your age because you all don't want to admit your age, but when you get my age, if you have more than one child, you will call every child's name until you get to the right child. And then some of you all who say, well, I'm not that age, Reverend Wade, so let me give you a little something about you. You will put on your glasses and you'll look for them all over the house and they're on your eyes. Then we have another thing where you'll go to a room looking for something, and when you get in there, you'll forget what you went in there for. That's not a sign of grief. That's a sign that we have to be careful because the mind will play tricks on you. Then there's guilt and anger. Sometimes you have to be careful about guilt and anger because when you're guilty, sometimes we feel guilty because we did not do certain things or say certain things when we had the opportunity. So what I tell people all the time now is treat your family as if it's your last day. Because you don't know when that time will be out. My wife and I have been married 54 years, you heard that. And when we first got married, we had some issues. We had some issues when we first got married. And if you get married, you'll have some issues. This might go on. How many married people have issues? Have you all had any issues? Have you ever had any issues in your marriage? Yeah. So you've never had any? Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to commend you because I've had some in mine. Issues mean you have problems. Stuff you have to talk about. Stuff you have to pray about. So what my wife and I made discovery, when we had some issues, we would always go through the day. I'd have my little face on. She'd have a little face on. And then we always had an agreement. We would never go to bed angry. And that was our agreement when we first married. We would never go to bed angry. So what we'd do, we go all day angry. We would go to bed angry. We'd spend the whole day angry. So my wife came up with something that has worked in our marriage. And that is, we decided to pray in the morning before we begin the day. And we found out that if you pray in the morning, God will keep you through the day. And we don't have the issues that we used to have because we began our day with prayer. So I'm trying to tell people that I don't care what it is that you're going through. I'm going to come to that in a minute. How much more time do I have? I want to say within the time. All right, keep me on the time because I'm a pastor preacher, so
You're fine.
All right, I don't want to act like I don't understand that. All right, then loneliness and withdrawal. One of the worst things you can do is when you're having a depressed state is to withdraw. We are people that are born to live with each other. That's why I have a problem with understanding how people can't get along. We're born. God created us that out of one flesh, out of one blood, out of the ground. God created us out of one dust of the ground. And let me tell you what I'm saying about dust. When I tell you about dust, dust is something nobody cares anything about. It didn't say that God created us out of the dirt of the ground. He said the dust. The dust. I want y'all to understand that. It didn't say he created us out of the dust, dirt, the dust. And nobody likes dust. You get rid of dust in your house. You're always trying to clean up the house, get rid of all that dust. But let me tell you what happened. God saw in us something we didn't see in ourselves. So what he did was, when man messed up, what God did, he sent his son to rescue us. And not only are we dust, but we're creatures after God's own heart. Now I can go into something else about that, but that's not what we're here for today. But I have to say something about Jesus, y'all. I'd have to put down my preacher's life if I didn't bring up Jesus' name. There's something about that name. Oh, there's healing in that name, y'all. All right, now, I'm about through, right? My time's about out. All right, let me go. All right. Y'all with the rest of this? Come in and Western Winter. All right, let me close out. How many of you have a Bible? How many of you have a Bible? Anyone have a Bible? All right. I want you, if you know anything about the Bible at all, you've heard about Psalm 23. Am I right? I don't care where you go, at a funeral, wherever you go, hospital, at the side of the bed, the chaplain, he'll take you to Psalm 23. Oh, I don't care where you go. And then sometimes we just hear it, in our meditative thoughts, we hear about Psalm 23, right? Well, let me give you all a little something about Psalm 23 that's going to bless you. So when you're going through your grieving spirit, I don't care what it is you're going through, run to Psalm 23 and take a fresh look at it. You ready? I want y'all to take a moment to go and look at Psalm 23 and tell me how many my's do you find in Psalm 23. Count them. Now, we're in the college, so it shouldn't take you all day to count them. Psalm 23, how many my's do you have? Count them. How long does it take you to count? How many? My. Everywhere you fail to find the word my. I didn't say me, I said my. M-Y. How many? 4? All right. How many me's do you find in Psalm 23? Huh? How many me? M-E. Huh? It should be 6. I'm not looking at it. Come on. Y'all can't count. The 6. At a university. Huh? 4 me's, 6 miles. How many I's? I. Huh? How many? Then how many M-I-N-E? Mine. Look at it. How many? It's 1, y'all. 1. Hold up one finger. It's 1. Oh, listen. Whenever you're going through your grieving experience, and this is what this is all about. When you're going through your grieving experience, this is what I want you to do. Run to Psalm 23. This is what you want this up. I want you to understand this. Whatever that you're going through, he is my shepherd. You'll see that? I want you to know that he restores your soul. You ready? He does something else. He leads you in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. And watch this. Yea, though I walk through the valley. I want y'all to see that. Yea, though I walk through the valley, you can never run through the valley. When you're going through your test. Now watch this. I'm done when I tell you this. If I was at church, I'd raise my voice and get the organ and have a little something on the side. But since I'm not at church, don't have an organ on the side, so I have to do it this way. I need y'all to look at all those mine, me, and mine, and I. Then I want you to look at this. Final thing is, it says, surely goodness. You all see that? Mm-hmm. How many of you all see that? Say that after me. Surely goodness and mercy shall do what? Don't go any further. Don't go any further. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. Now watch this. Surely goodness and mercy are what we call twin attributes. Goodness and mercy. Now when you look at that passage, it says goodness and mercy shall follow me. Watch this. When goodness and mercy is following you, literally, goodness and mercy is running you down. Goodness and mercy is literally chasing after you. Goodness and mercy is running to overcome you and overshadow you with God's goodness and God's mercy in order to bless you. So I don't care what you're going through, you have God's good. Say it after me. You have God's what?
Goodness.
I didn't say that like that. I said you have God's what?
Goodness.
You have God's goodness, and you have God's what?
Mercy.
And God's goodness and mercy is doing what? Running you down in order to bless your life. God bless you and God bless you.